The first known record of Robert Stiff's name didn't appear in public documents or news headlines. It was discovered scrawled in jagged ink across the margins of an unpublished 1973 field report from the British Society for Psychical Research. The document, recovered decades later in a decommissioned Cold War listening post near Devon, simply read, "Subject has begun to cross thresholds he should not. Robert Stiff has made contact." No one at the time could explain who wrote it, nor how the page ended up sealed behind a false wall lined with lead. What little could be pieced together about Robert's early life came from regional census data and a single photograph. A grim-faced man in his early 30s, staring past the camera in a way that made archivists uncomfortable. Born in Northumberland in 1947, Robert spent much of his youth alone. Teachers recalled his obsession with symbols and dialects no one could identify. "He speaks backwards sometimes," a neighbor once noted in a long-lost interview, "but it's not gibberish, it's listening." Then, in 1971, he vanished. 2 years after his disappearance, strange occurrences began to ripple across the English countryside. Livestock carcasses arranged in patterns mimicking Mesopotamian star maps. Fields carved with runes no archaeologist could translate. A retired linguist, Professor Elgar Moore, reportedly received a short-wave transmission that repeated only one phrase: "Tell him he was not supposed to find the ninth gate." The signal was traced to an abandoned coal mine, sealed since 1911 due to unexplainable tremors beneath the earth. The mine was reopened under unofficial circumstances. A private research collective known only as Crowned Oak funded the dig. Within weeks, whispers of subterranean chambers began to circulate. The team reported unearthed inscriptions in a language blending Proto-Mumerian with something never catalogued. They also discovered a crude effigy. A man with no face, only a vertical slit from forehead to chin. The figure bore a plaque at its feet, Stiff's warning. One of the workers reportedly laughed upon reading it. He was found the next morning, skin turned gray, mouth filled with gravel. It was only in 1982 that the full extent of Robert Stiff's descent into forbidden knowledge came to light. A tape reel, labeled Session 9 Chime Ritual, Stiff, surfaced through a series of leaks tied to a disgraced MI5 archivist. The audio is chilling. Over a bed of static and low-frequency pulses, Robert's voice can be heard murmuring syllables that seem to fold into themselves. At minute 1703, he utters the phrase, "They've made me remember before birth." Shortly after, a sound, metal grinding on bone, cuts off the recording. Experts who listened to the reel either dismissed it as performance art or fell into deep states of paranoia. One linguist committed suicide after claiming he finally translated the reversed portion of the tape. "Do not open the gray door in the black soil. It is not meant for time." Attempts to trace the location of this door led to the border of Hexham Moor, where locals have long told stories of lights that hover and vanish near the peat fields. Robert's abandoned van was later found nearby. Inside they found maps, hand-drawn, marked with concentric circles and the sigil of Saturn. Books of mystery deepen here, because in the center of Robert's map was an unfamiliar glyph. It was circular, inscribed with 7 notches and 3 intersecting axes. To anyone else it would appear meaningless, but to one researcher, Dr. Adrian Venn, it matched a carving he'd seen in a Coptic monastery near Alexandria. One the monks said should never be spoken of. They called it the Eye Beneath. Robert had drawn it with obsessive precision. Crowned Oak quickly shut down operations after the discovery. Publicly, they dissolved due to internal fraud. Privately, however, several of its surviving members reported mass hallucinations and poltergeist activity, shadows in the corners of vision, time skipping seconds at a time. The last communication from their lead field agent was a scrawled message. He opened the 7th seal. It wasn't metaphorical. By the late 1980s, Robert Stiff had become a cautionary tale among underground circles of esoteric researchers. His notebooks, referred to as the Stiff Codices, circulated through private collections. They were always incomplete, Pages went missing, symbols blurred when photographed. One page, however, appeared in nearly every recovered copy. A drawing of an ancient gateway flanked by statues with no faces, and beneath it the phrase, "This is where they whispered the names of the Hollow Kings." Then came the dream reports. All across the UK, people with no connection to Robert Stiff or each other began reporting vivid, repeating nightmares. Always the same, walking down a corridor of rust-colored stone, being followed by footsteps that echoed before they were made, and a low hum that vibrated their bones. At the end of the corridor, a single stone door, pulsing like a heartbeat. Many woke up screaming the same word, Althun. An Oxford parapsychology team tried to model the dream architecture using sound therapy. The experiment failed. 3 participants were hospitalized for neurological trauma. One subject, a former priest, spoke in tongues for 16 hours. The only decipherable phrase was, "The threshold of flesh is weakening." In 1993, a journalist named Darren Lorne tracked down what he believed was the last surviving member of Crowned Oak. The man, only identified as Mr. L, was incoherent, but through static written tapes, Lorne captured a crucial line. Robert didn't die. He moved through. He followed the lines under the earth. You don't get it. He didn't want to be found. And yet, in 2001, a blurred photograph emerged on a fringe message board called Whispers from the Veil. It showed a figure standing beneath a monolith of unknown origin, somewhere in Patagonia. The man resembled Robert Stiff, aged, pale, but unmistakable. Etched into the monolith behind him were the same 9 sigils from the Stiff Codices. The post was taken down in under an hour. The user account that posted it deleted. Its IP? Traced to a terminal last active in 1984. Now whispered rumors circulate again. A new transmission has been detected pulsing at 17.03 mach/mH, the exact time signature from the Stiff reel. It plays only one phrase. They have begun building the circle again. Authorities dismiss it as atmospheric interference, but a small anonymous group of archivists believe it's the same signal Robert described in his final note. The hum beneath everything, the pre-sound. And now, something stirs again. The dreamers have returned. The fields have begun to shift. And the symbol is glowing. The gate opens not with keys, but with remembering. The signal pulsing at 17.03 mH had no identifiable source. Satellites failed to triangulate its origin, and when researchers attempted to recreate the frequency in laboratory settings, electronic instruments began to malfunction. Oscilloscopes displayed symbols instead of waveforms, interlocking rings, spirals, and a repeated glyph resembling a serpent swallowing its own echo. A former RAF technician named Cyril Gant, now living in self-imposed exile in Shetland, claimed to have deciphered the pulse pattern. According to his unverified reports, the signal wasn't transmitting words but coordinates, locations across the globe where time had reportedly buckled. Each coordinate corresponded to an unexplained phenomenon. A church in Prague that rang bells at 3:33 a.m. without a clapper, a mountain in Kazakhstan that casts 2 shadows at noon, a submerged ruin off the coast of Sicily where compasses spin violently counterclockwise. But all the paths led back to one point, a location marked in Robert Stiff's final diagram, scrawled beneath the phrase Threshold 3, where the shell breathes. It referred to a section of the British countryside now owned by a private holding company called Tethros Limited, registered to an offshore entity with no visible employees. On satellite imagery, the area appeared blank, as if reality itself had been erased from that exact patch of land. In January 2023, a team of independent explorers calling themselves the Daughters of Enoch trespassed into the restricted zones surrounding the site. Only one member returned, a man named Jacob Roundtree. He was found wandering the A69 motorway barefoot, eyes burnt white. He kept repeating, "We walked in with time, we left without it." His heartbeat was irregular, as though sinking to a rhythm inaudible to everyone but himself. When he was sedated, he began humming. It matched the exact modulation of the 17.03-minute signal. Roundtree died 72 hours later, but not before sketching what he called the mouth. The image depicted a colossal stone-lined chamber shaped like a spiral shell descending endlessly. Human figures lined the walls, not as carvings, but embedded, half-submerged in the stone. One figure at the bottom bore an unmistakable likeness to Robert Stiff. His eyes were open, and then the weather changed. In a 30-mile radius around the site, birds stopped flying. Dogs refused to enter the woods. Long-range radar at a nearby weather station reported a void in atmospheric pressure, like a dome of stillness sitting atop the land. Local folklore quickly revived the return of the hollow wind, an ancient Northumbrian legend that spoke of a breath that steals memory, leaving wanderers alive but hollow. For the first time in decades, villagers began sealing their doors at night and hanging iron symbols above their thresholds. Then came the children's drawings. A primary school teacher in Haltwhistle noticed several students had begun sketching the same image in their free time. A man made of holes, eyes where his fingers should be, standing beneath a sky of black roots. They called him Mr. Stiff. When asked how they knew the name, one girl replied, "He told us in our dreams. He said he's almost finished turning." The Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport issued an unusual directive to local media: no coverage of the so-called Stiff phenomenon. Leaked memos showed reference to contagious semiotic anomalies and potential idioplastic intrusion. Linguists and occult historians began to collaborate in secret forums, suggesting that Robert had not only crossed into forbidden territory, but that he had become part of it, a living sigil, a breach incarnate. But there was more. A suppressed document from the British Museum dated 1894 described the excavation of a limestone sarcophagus in the Syrian desert. Inside, a skeletal figure whose skull bore the engraved phrase, "He who will wake the mouth of earth." The skull's dimensions were non-human, but more disturbingly, the name Stiff appeared again, inscribed with unnatural precision beside the sigil of Saturn. Was Robert Stiff not the first? Or worse, was he the last iteration of something older? An entity returning in cycles through chosen vessels? The idea gained traction when footage surfaced from an antique camera found in a cathedral crypt in France. The 8mm reel, dated 1922, shows a man walking backwards through a stone arch that did not exist in any known part of the building. His face was obscured, but he wore a pendant, a ringed spiral exactly matching the one from Robert's notes. The film ends with a frame of pure static, except for a faint whisper. He comes again, with dust in his breath. Some now believe that Robert didn't open the door. He was the door. His obsession, his disappearance, the frequencies, the monoliths. They weren't paths toward knowledge, they were symptoms of a deeper infection. A spiritual parasitism that reactivates in cycles when humanity comes too close to old truths. Crowned Oak had tried to contain it, so did the Church, so did the Romans. All failed. And as of last month, that mouth may have spoken again. A group of researchers decoding the 17.03 MHz pulses have identified a new pattern. It repeats every 33 hours. They believe it is a countdown. The message embedded within is incomplete, but the last translation attempts reveal a chilling possibility. Phase 2 begins when the name is spoken, 3 times beneath open stone, and someone somewhere has already spoken it twice. It began with a phone call at 3:33 a.m. Dr. Imran Kaveh, a semiotician at the University of Exeter, was roused from sleep by a voice, flat, mechanical, but undeniably human. The caller recited 3 numbers, 71.2, 0.1, 33.7, then silence, The line disconnected. But as Dr. Cave lay frozen in bed, unable to move or speak, the numbers repeated in his mind, this time in Robert Stiff's voice, though he had never heard it before. Cross-referencing the numbers with archived data, Cave realized they pointed to a forgotten military site beneath the Scottish Highlands. The base, codenamed Camp Thermos, was built in the 1950s and allegedly dismantled in the 1980s. But satellite scans revealed recent structural shifts in the surrounding terrain, patterns too symmetrical to be natural. Something deep underground was pressing upward, something that hadn't moved in decades, or centuries. Cave gathered a small expedition. Ex-military, geophysicists, and one forbidden archaeologist who had been expelled from the academic world for attempting to prove that Hadrian's Wall was built to keep something in, not out. What they found beneath Camp Thermos was a stairwell that should not exist, carved of obsidian knack stone and descending at a mathematically impossible angle. The stairwell was warm despite the permafrost above, warm and breathing. At the 12th landing they discovered a door without hinges, flanked by relief carvings of figures in contorted poses, not human, but human becoming something else. Cave traced his fingers along the sigils. 7 symbols, each pulsing faintly with heat. And then it happened. The moment his palm rested on the final glyph, the door emitted a low moan, like stone grieving its own resurrection. Behind the door was a chamber that bent perception. Light curved inward, time fragmented. Team members reported hearing voices in reverse, seeing flashes of events that had not yet occurred. Fires in London, oceans turning black, a tower of bone rising above the Thames. At the center stood a monolithic altar etched with the name Stiff again and again in different ancient scripts, some known, most not. In a state of trance, Cave approached the altar and found a slab carved with a familiar symbol. The spiral eye, the same one found in Robert's sketches, the children's drawings, the Syrian skull. The moment his gaze locked with the sigil, Cave dropped to his knees, whispering, "It's not him. It's what he let in." They left the chamber in silence. The team disbanded. Files were scrubbed. Cave vanished 2 weeks later. In his apartment, investigators found an object never catalogued before. A spherical stone covered in microscopic writing. Beneath it, a page torn from the Stiff Codices, with only 5 words written in blood. "He is neither dead nor alone." The signal changed. At exactly 1703, the Hume began rising, oscillating into harmonic intervals that formed a recognizable pattern. Not random, not coded, musical. A melody older than any known composition, echoing the resonant architecture of the Great Pyramid, the hypogeum of Halsaflieni and Göbekli Tepe. Structures aligned with celestial bodies not as they are now, but as they were millennia ago. This musical key, dubbed the Stiff Harmonic, was played experimentally at low volumes inside a soundproof chamber by Dr. Greer Haynes, an acoustics researcher in Berlin. Within hours, Dr. Haynes's team experienced temporal distortion, instruments reversed polarity, clocks looped back 7 minutes. One researcher claimed to have seen himself walk out of the lab, look at him and whisper, "Don't finish the song." And yet, someone is finishing the song. A splinter group calling themselves the Choir of the Hollow Kings has begun broadcasting fragments of the harmonic on deep web frequency bands. Their manifesto claims that Robert Stiff was not a man but a mnemonic construct, a viral archetype re-emerging whenever the veil between time and anti-time thins. Their goal is simple: to welcome the full harmonic, to bring the eye beneath into complete resonance with the world above. Governments are silent. Agencies deny involvement, but leaked documents suggest NATO's Section 8, a group so classified its existence is debated even within intelligence circles, has begun deploying satellite-based countermeasures to neutralize geoacoustic anomalies. Whatever they've discovered, It terrifies them enough to risk weaponizing frequencies they barely understand. And now the dreamers are returning in waves. People across continents report the same vision. A man, faceless but familiar, standing in an underground cathedral of bone and silence. He raises a hand, not to welcome, but to silence. Around him, pillars carved with scenes of human beings giving birth to shadows. Atop each pillar, a crown of black iron. And from every mouth, the name Stiff, repeated in endless chorus. You have heard the signal. You have seen the signs. The countdown is nearly complete. And the threshold is whispering. He is almost through. The choir of the Hollow Kings was not broadcasting anymore. 3 days after they streamed the full harmonic from an abandoned radio tower in Bulgaria, every known member vanished. No evidence, no remains. Only the final frame of their live transmission remained, grainy, overexposed, and impossibly wrong. The sky above them had cracked like glass, and something was looking through. The signal at 17.03 mHm stopped pulsing. It began responding. Researchers who had monitored it for years reported new patterns, mimicked phrases, reversed versions of human speech spoken milliseconds before the actual person spoke them aloud. One technician unplugged the receiver. The voice kept answering. It was no longer broadcasting. It was listening. Across the world, certain locations began experiencing identical phenomena. Magnetic poles warped briefly, gravity stuttered in underground spaces, and most terrifyingly, ancient ruins that had been dormant for thousands of years began to resonate. Not symbolically, but physically. Stones vibrated, dust fell, and glyphs, long thought to be inert, began to glow faintly with something deeper than light. A secret task force dispatched to the Nazca lines returned early, traumatized and silent. Satellite photos taken during the incident showed new lines, unseen before, forming a spiral too precise for primitive hands. It matched the sigil from Robert's notes. But it wasn't drawn. It was burned into the earth. And beneath that spiral, seismic scans detected a hollow cavity. A chamber buried beneath 300 feet of stone and volcanic ash, a structure older than the soil surrounding it. Inside was a throne made of bone, not carved but grown. Etched along its arms, he who sat in waiting will soon sit in truth. But no body sat upon it. Only a mask, the same faceless mask found in the coal mine 50 years ago, the one from the monolith, the one from the dreams. Then the dreams changed, no longer glimpses or symbols, but full memories, ancient memories. People across continents began recalling lives they never lived, walking beneath twin suns, offering blood to statues whose names have not been spoken for millennia. Always present in these visions, a man with empty eyes, watching, silent, waiting. Dr. Cavey's name appeared again, scratched into the floor of a sealed tomb in Ethiopia, dated to 2800 BCE. Impossible. His bones were confirmed and buried, and yet the name was not carved in stone, but grown into the sediment, as if the earth had remembered it independently. And beside it, another name, Robert Stiff. The Vatican issued a quiet proclamation through inner channels. All references to the mouth of Stiff are to be considered heretical anomalies and should be quarantined from theological discourse. Yet internal leaks revealed that, beneath Vatican archives, sublevel 5, an ancient stone bearing the spiral eye sigil had begun leaking salt water. From within, a deep-sea expedition funded by a Scandinavian think tank stumbled upon a submerged temple beneath the Arctic shelf. It bore 7 spiral gates, perfectly aligned to magnetic ley lines, each one humming with the harmonic sequence. And at the center of the temple, engraved in gold leaf across the altar, he sings beneath ice, and the world has begun to listen. Then came the breach. At exactly 1703 GMT, seismic alarms triggered worldwide. Instruments failed, planes rerouted. A fissure opened near the coordinates first broadcast in the 1973 reelback in Devon, where the Society for Psychical Research had once sealed a listening post behind a lead-lined wall. But this time, it wasn't a listening post. It had the lock, and it had turned. The fissure released no smoke, no gas, no heat. Instead, sound rose from it, not violent, melodic, slow, patient. Beneath it, layers of impossible architecture were glimpsed, stone towers made of screaming faces, spirals embedded in air itself, staircases climbing downward. But what emerged first was a shadow. It had no form, no mass, yet it bent trees, buckled walls, and extinguished light. And at its center was a voice. Not Robert Stiff, not a human, a voice that had been waiting to be remembered. A final satellite image, scrubbed from NASA's archives, showed a spiral cloud formation over Devon, but not above it, below the Earth. A reverse cyclone etched through layers of terrain, glowing faintly with harmonics as it drilled into the crust. And now the signal has changed again. No longer a pulse, not a melody, a call. And the last recorded transmission on 17.03 mmH? Just 6 words, spoken in Robert's voice. "Imi, I am returning." The vessel becomes the voice becomes the world.